Welcome to Niche Fighter Monday. Welcome to Murfight Monday. Ooh boy, it's been a long road, man. For those who have been paying attention to what's been going on with Murfight, it has been in development in some way, shape, or form since 2018. And finally, in 2024, we get to enjoy the official launch of Murfight. We're gonna do some FGC talk stuff. I'm taking you to class. Yo, we did fighting game sociology several months back, and it's game business dev 101 is what we're gonna be doing today. Murfight is leaving early access, and like, what even is early access? We cover a lot of games here in the digital basement. We cover stuff like Frostfire. What else do we play? We play a lot of like Beast of Mystery from Utrex. That's a new game that's in development, right? It's out in an alpha form. Dragon Blast, which is an old Dojin game from the 2000s that, never got completed. Monster Ancient Klein. I spent 2 weeks straight talking and playing Monster Ancient Klein because the previously thought lost beta had come out. Murfight's been among these games that have been in alpha, in beta, in early access in some form, right? And then it's only today, like I said, that it gets this version 1.0 release. It's a really long journey getting from idea to thing in people's hands, right? I can speak to that just as an editor, as a writer. It takes a lot. When you have these ideas in your head and then you get them, once you get them down onto paper, which is its own struggle, you then have to produce the thing, right? You gotta make the video, do the stream, finish the art piece, and that's always a long ass journey. So I think it's worth looking at what this journey is like for developers, for indie devs in particular, as they progress through these phases from prototype through beta onto their full releases. I think it's also worth talking about what the stages of that journey actually are and what we as players think about them. We talk about these terms, right? Alphas, betas, launch, early access. But what do they even mean? Some of these terms are very fluid. They have different meanings depending on where you come from, but they have this basis in software development, right? Wider, larger software development communities. We're gonna take a look at that and also see how do they apply to video games. Let's talk about them, because these are kind of the common terms that are used when we talk about in development games, right? You can start at the idea of the proof of concept, right? And a proof of concept is just, theoretical in nature. It's a design doc, it's your pitch, right? It's the thing that you write it out and you're can this thing be something I can make, right? What do I want to see out of this product, whether it be in software, right, a database system, or whether it be a video game. Chuckles nervously, Andrea, because you never have design docs. And this is what I say, these things, these are not rules. I want to actually, before we get too deep into this, right, giant caveat that this is not how all product development and software development works. And yeah, we're gonna talk about some things like the minimum viable product that might be actually more relevant to the way our indie devs operate. Generally speaking, right, we talk about, I think we can talk about the general framing of how we look at in development progress and products. In development stuff is usually proof of concept, then you go and you make your prototype, right? You prove that cour design concept can actually work as you pitched it, right? And then you have an alpha build. An alpha build is very much early in development. You probably, your prototype wouldn't have any kind of real final art assets. It's proving that the core functionality, right? The core pitch that you have, the core thing that you're selling people on, that works as intended, even if none of the other things run it. So it's not going to be user-friendly, but if you know what you're doing, you can be okay, yes, it achieves the goal. And then you move on to alphas. And alphas are usually still really rough, still really early, but much more of a okay, these are all of the working pieces. And that's usually designed for internal testing. Most people, the wider world is not going to see your alpha build of stuff, right? The wider world will see your alpha build when you get to your beta, which usually includes wider public testing. It basically acts like a release candidate, where most of your stuff is completely feature complete. It's going to be relatively user-friendly, and you're there for your final pass of make sure the user experience lines up with everything that you've gone through your prototype and alpha phase. Ostensibly, your beta is going to be what's going to be released. And if you look at games like Guilty Gear Strive. Guilty Gear Strive is a great example of something that came out. Like, it was a beta, and people were like, oh, it's a beta. There's so much time. If we have any problems, things can change. It's like, no, that beta, when they did the online testing for the rollback solution when Guilty Gear Strive first came out, that was pretty much the final product. Like, they were so deep into development at that point, and they did this wider public testing because they had already basically said, we're going to be feature complete, man. And it's like, we can do tweaks, but like, we're not going to be changing major direction at this point. Interesting, Andrea. Historical fact, the alpha for Schwab's 6 characters very well was seen by a lot of people because of the fortuitous circumstances. Right, it ended up being a bit of a star on Game Jolt, if I'm not mistaken. More eyes on the alpha than on the beta for Schwab. That was crazy. That is kind of wild, right? That's definitely not usually how it works. Okay, and so, right, we got our betas, we did our proof of concept, our prototype, our alpha, our beta, and then we launch our game, right? Our beta is basically our final launch candidate. We do our final round of tweaks and revisions and consumer feedback. Boom, we launch, right? Like, this sounds like a relatively standard process, and I think this is when people, like, they're like, oh, it's a beta, it's an alpha, it's like, they kind of get this. And this all stems from some kind of like well-established software development practices. But this particular framing pretty much assumes a specific type of project management. It's a project management style that's often used in larger companies. It's something called the waterfall methodology. As you might have guessed, right? The waterfall methodology is a development cycle that really flows straight down. You have your design doc, and you do not start on making anything until your design doc is finalized and approved by the board. And then you move on to creating your prototype, which is, you don't start engaging with the artist. You use all developer assets, all programmer assets, just to prove that things work. And right, it's not only till that you've proven that can work in a certain functional level that you've moved down, and then you engage your artist to start developing the art for it, yada, 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 right? It's a very, very linear process. It's well suited for really large organizations that have like a lot of really strict requirements. So this structure, right, the waterfall methodology, can really help ensure that this development doesn't proceed too far without making sure you've met certain criteria, very specific criteria. And those criteria, they could be like regulatory, they could be legal, they could be contractual, right? Or they could just be like company best practices. But this very linear, one step leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next, and you have to go through all the proper channels. That waterfall methodology, I think one of the best, like a basic, super basic example of how that works and why that happens at large companies is like, look, Capcom would not want to like build out all of their 3D models for Marvel vs. Capcom 4 without making sure that their concept art actually meets Marvel's IP requirements. Like, Marvel's gonna have really stringent IP requirements, and you don't want to start engaging your 3D artist doing modeling and rigging, only to realize that, oh damn, no, that's the character's not allowed to move like that. They don't actually have those, right? Those appendages aren't gonna be important. That's not the visual style we're going. Like, you're not gonna do that until you've guaranteed that you've met your contractual requirements with your partner. A company like Capcom would be well inclined to implement this kind of linear waterfall methodology, right? That kind of structure is going to be super, super helpful. So they're not going to waste all this time and money, right, doing stuff that is going to just be thrown away, right? And now start applying that to like the entire design process. And so that's the idea of the waterfall methodology, right? And I think that kind of methodology is what, like, it birthed these terms, right? And the idea of your prototype, your alpha, your beta, and what those things do, while a little malleable and fluid, still like stems from that kind of rigid structure. So like, yeah, a company like Capcom with like thousands of employees, a bunch of contractors, tons of licensors, probably a bunch of like government and like financial requirements, they're going to really benefit from this style to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. This is a style that's long been used in wider software circles. But you've also seen it in fighting game circles. A company like Sirlin Games, they have a much more top-down, linear, waterfall structured management style. And I think partly because they come from, like Sirlin comes from a background of working with Capcom, and so probably like has structured themselves as a larger company and has implemented these company-wide like cultural and legal requirements and like style requirements that they're able to manage that with this top-down waterfall style. Right? So even mid-sized creators like Sirlin Games will use that kind of stuff. I think as a result, you've seen that they as a company and as a developer have had trouble shifting and like reprioritizing based on consumer requests and concerns, right? So folks had a bunch of concerns about the direction of Fantasy Strike, whether it be balance, whether it be lack of promised cosmetic updates. My favorite example is like a bunch of the community was like, damn man, we love these characters, we love this stuff, we'd love merch, right? And like me as like an artist and a creator, I'm like, look, it's not gonna be, it takes, all of this take works. Everything takes effort and is gonna cost something. But the cost of setting up something like a Redbubble store is relatively minimal, and it'll address a great consumer demand. But the structure, those waterfall structure, the structure that Sterling Games was set up in, means that they had these requirements that they like, that request from consumers had to go to the top. And then you're like, okay, if we want to implement something, we need to contact our consultants, which, inform us on how best business practices on doing X, Y, and Z. So if we're going to do merch, we're going to have to do our investigation of what is the best store. And this all takes time and effort and consultation, right? And so they run it through. But by the time it gets back down and they've implemented something that consumers are like, now I can go pick up a poster or a t-shirt with Lum on it or Jaina on it, right? By that point, people have said, I'm not interested anymore. They've fallen out of fashion, right? And once again, this is a single example. Apply that to the entirety of your development cycle. If all of those consumer requests have to go to the top and trickle their way back down to you, it's a very like unresponsive model, which probably isn't the best thing. It's like not super flexible. Yeah, you're not a fan of close requirements. In your honest opinion, you should always be able to downsize. Well, and yes, absolutely. Well, you need to be able to pivot and react, right? And if you have all these requirements, that is great. Like, especially if you have a very strong vision and you're working with a lot of varied partners and you want to ensure that that thing, even when you're not there, is going to find its way back to you to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. Like, I respect that. I definitely understand that. And that makes sense for a lot of companies and a lot of organizations. But for small developers, for indie developers, the ability to be able to say, we don't need to do that. We need to reprioritize this. I need to have people working in tandem on various things to make sure that we're able to address any concern as it comes up, right? That versatility is way more beneficial to a small developer who, would honestly get bogged down in the requirements and not be able to get to the issues. Yeah, it makes sense, but not for things that need a lot of fast iterations. There are other ways you can handle this. So we've talked about I've talked a little bit about the waterfall style. There are other ways you can handle this as well. But okay, Andrea, I think you said it. Not for a lot of things that need a lot of fast iterations. What do you do? What do you do? What is a better way to organize your development process if you need that kind of fast iteration, if you need that flexibility? So there's another style of project management outside of waterfall called Agile. And the Agile management style is actually something of a direct response to waterfall within the software development world. I think it's especially notable when you look at like startup culture, right? Their whole move fast and break things ethos. That has like really been reflected in Agile development. Andrea is saying they have to work Agile at work, but that doesn't mean that they like it all the time. And there are benefits and positives and negatives to both of these management styles. But yeah, I would say that Agile was kind of a response to the waterfall style and an embracing of the move fast and break things ethos of startup culture. Agile has creators working on multiple phases of a project concurrently. The goal is to get a functional version of the project into people's hands so they can start interacting with it as soon as possible. This helps create a really quick feedback loop with frequent user feedback that you're able to act on right as it comes in. So this way, creators are able to respond to player concerns. So like, we gave the example of, right, like Strive being too far into development for any major changes to how it was going by the time the beta got into players' hands. Or the Sterling Games style of development, which is more structured and rigid and linear, which led to some, issues in addressing player concerns. Like, this is actually how a lot of indie devs work on their games, especially when it comes to early access releases, right? That kind of allows that immediate feedback. And so, what did I say, right? You want to get the goal is to get a functional version of the project into players' hands. And Mohas said it very early on in this stream. Minimum viable product. The MVP becomes a very important part of this equation now, right? And this is where you kind of start seeing the breakdown, right, with the framing that we had before. So if you use the traditional framing of, proof of concept, prototype, alpha, beta, launch candidate, right? that kind of starts breaking down in agile development, because your first core goal is not to create the basic level thing. It's to get it up and running at a functional level and into people's hands as soon as possible. Like an MVP should in theory be something you're willing to like put a price tag on and sell to people. It's a functional product. It might be the minimum viable version of that product, as the name indicates, but it's a functional product. If we want to look in the world of fighting games once again, Beast of Mystery. It's called a playable alpha is what Mutrex has called it. They got a game up and running with 3 characters, fully animated, 1 stage background, 1 song, basic training mode, and button config. So from a user standpoint, it's fairly functional. I can boot up the game, I can practice stuff, I can play against my friends. There's no online, but that doesn't matter because you're selling people on the core aspect of the fighting game. They have created a product that they're like, this is the minimum viable version. That vertical slice of the cake is another way to look at it. Yes, vertical slice is another term used in software development and game dev. So like that is what Mutrex has gone and done, right? And so they've created this. So you can see that it doesn't really line up, right? Like if you have a minimum viable product that you're selling, that is ostensibly your beta. It's basically your launch candidate, right? Some folks will go into early access, which also doesn't quite fit inside the realm of the initial framing, the waterfall management style framing. We get this breakdown, right, in this framing. So early access, modern day alphas, right? The way indie devs test the waters with their games is much more in line with agile development, which doesn't use that typical alpha beta launch candidate production cycle and structure, right? Like I said, it's this quick iterative process. There's a lot of close customer feedback when it comes to this, and you can ask any of the devs about this close customer feedback, building a community, getting a Discord going, getting the constant feedback from players, whether it be analytics from in-game or just like social media and, like I said, Discord and community interactions. That kind of feedback can be overwhelming at times, but it can also be invaluable. Andre is saying, a problem that you've seen as of recent is that new games have troubles finding an audience for that feedback. You were thinking about Robot Heroes and Gamma Surge in particular, 2 games that really deserve eyes on them. So this is part of the desire of the indie dev or the indie creator, is to get something out there as soon as possible to get all that feedback. But there's a bit of a paradox in that you've seen a pushback from a lot of video game fans and gamers about early access games, about perpetual early access games. This idea that something goes into early access and then 9 years later it's still in early access and you're like, is this game done? I don't know. Like, it seems like a fully functional game. And then other games that go into early access in extremely, extremely early states, more like prototypes. The spectrum on that can, I think, really frustrate a lot of players. How early do you put it out? In what state do you put it out in? How much feedback can you get? Can you get enough of right? Because a lot of players don't want to look at what is a very, very early style of game. Yeah, Warthog, right? For indie writers, finding feedback. For artists, finding feedback is super difficult, but super important. Getting into the right communities and being able to present things in a way that, like, people will be able to latch onto, right? I think your average art fan doesn't necessarily want to see early sketches and line art. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong on that, right? But I think a lot of people like seeing the impressive finished pieces. But other artists may be really interested in seeing that development process, right? Other creators may be interested in seeing the development process. And so making sure you're engaging with the right audience on the right terms is really important. Yeah, agile vertical sprints, says Hypergrav, are a bit weak when you don't have feedback. That's one of the risks, right? If you can't get that feedback loop, it's actually kind of an underwhelming and a much less useful method. Hypergrav saying, there's a lot of devs that seem to be shifting towards a hybrid waterfall, with either Kanban or Agile, iterating on vertical slices to prevent losing the forest for the trees. There is something to be said about meeting somewhere in the middle. And I think that really comes down to having an excellent project manager in an agile environment. Instead of, like, they are truly the one that have to act as the, like, linear funnel that would exist in waterfall, right? They have to be the one to do that in one step. and a really effective project manager is gonna be able to make sure that vision across all the different disciplines, across all the different teams who are working in somewhat siloed environments, right? That they make sure that they don't lose sight of that stuff. Well, and this is it. Like, for me as a player, like, I check out a lot of really early in development stuff. I don't mind if I have to use anti-micro to set up my arcade stick. So if there's poor like controller recognition or no button config, I can manage. I can deal with having no graphics settings. I can deal with having placeholder art for a bunch of animations. That's fine for me. But a lot of players look at that stuff and balk, and they're just like, what is this? Why is this game even here? Do not show me this nonsense. Yeah, gamers going blind. Another thing comes to mind is people you've talked to really don't like going to Patreon to support for games like Fury Royale, Frostfire, Hell Versus. They'd rather wait for release. I'm talking about player expectations. A lot of players expect that if they're paying for something, that they should have it complete and outright, and right, and that's that. So it kind of clashes with the minimum viable product, which is like, look, you can buy it and purchase it, and it's going to be iterated on over time. But yeah, the I'll wait until release is a real phenomenon. It is one of the things that when you hit MVP demo stuff and early access, there's some friction with the player base. You could also preview a build with 4 characters, and in 10 minutes, everyone's like, who's top tier? True, man. Like, the, once again, the, like, yeah, it's like, oh, this character's busted, why would you bother, right? It's like, because the character was, like, is not even fully formed? Maybe that's why? I don't know. What are players seeing when they pick that up, man? Like, if you put it out, they might think that you're putting it out because it's done. Others can recognize that it might not be out in that state. You know what? Actually, maybe this is a good time. Like, let's shift over. So, like, what is a better way to look at this, right? Like, what is a better way to look at this from a player perspective to not be kind of disappointed or have the wrong set of expectations going into a game that might be a prototype versus an early access versus whatever the case may be? And how can we look at the games and these stages of development from the developer's perspective to know when is, like, what is required out of it and when should, like, you be pushing this on people? Okay, so we need to look at, we need a new framing for looking at in development projects, right? So you can still have your proof of concept, right? Much like you do in other management styles or in our former framing. But you can kind of merge that with prototype, where a lot of indie devs they won't necessarily do, like Andrea says, they don't have design docs. They don't really do that, right? A lot of indie games and indie devs start things with game jams. Murfight started as a game jam game. Murfight was a game that, or a game jam project that Matt DeLucas did that was primarily a, like, rollback prototype, right? And so you can kind of merge that, like, proof of concept and prototype stage together, right? And that stuff, look, man, it's going to be for the super early adopter. Very rarely, I think, are you going to be throwing out your prototype, your game jam thing as a, like, hey, publishers, come give me $800,000. Don't you want to do that? Don't you want to publish this? Right? It's like all programmer art. There's like zero UI. People's buttons don't work half the time. But hey, man, you like rollback works, right? Like that's what it's like sometimes for those prototypes, right? So they're for the, if anything, they're for your peers. They're for getting feedback from fellow developers, from fellow creators, maybe from the absolute super fan, the people who are like super early adopters. Like, I would consider myself in that category, right? Where I'm like, if you guys want to throw me a prototype of like one character, everything looks identical, it's wireframe stages, but you have like a core deformable terrain 3D fighting game idea that you want to pitch, like, I'm down to try that out. Like, I can parse what that is, but like most people, they are gonna be like, what is this? Once you get past that, agile development is really pushing for an MVP. It's pushing for a minimum viable product, right? And so something like this is gonna have to be demo quality, something that you would see from a major publisher releasing a demo or like a netcode stress test beta. It's got to be like a polished vertical slice at the very least. Something like, I keep forgetting the name of it. Is it Omen of Sorrow? No. Umbral Core. Thank you, Andrea. It came out with a very, very, very solid vertical slice. It was super polished. Everything that was in there, I was like, I could see that in a final game. The Kickstarter for it sadly failed. I think precisely, it was too early for a Kickstarter, right? That was your MVP. That was something that was great to put out there. And in fact, they have, because I believe if you go to itch.io, you can rate today. You can go to itch.io and purchase that MVP for $30. It is available right there. Yeah, I know. I just discovered this the other day, actually, right? I was very surprised. And I'm sad that they don't push this more. I believe that if they had done this, I think $30 personally is too expensive. That being said, Beasts of Mystery, I believe it's $10 for their paid MVP. And $10, that's a reasonable price of entry, especially if you get updates in that paid MVP, and use it as a bridge towards the final version. If Umbral Core had pushed more, we're going to do a $10 MVP, we're going to do a Patreon MVP like they have done with Frostfire, like they have done with Hellversus, and a couple other games that were mentioned earlier in chat. That is something that they could have done, but they shot their shot really early, and they tried to go for the Kickstarter, and it didn't make it. And I think that kind of breaks your cycle, right? Like, that is a big deflation. And then after that, they obviously put this thing out on itch.io in order to help continually fund development, which is how the MVP process should work. But here we are. The fact that Andrea didn't know about it until now, and I didn't find out until a week ago when I went scouring itch.io for new games, means that no one's talking about it. It means that it's not being pushed in that way, right? And so the that agile, quick iterative cycle, it's been broken now. They're not getting the feedback they need and the financial support they need to reinvest in their development cycle and keep the game moving forward and the development moving forward, and then being able to increase interest based on that. Dude, yeah, there you go. Queen's Conquest, same thing. You absolutely, thank you for pointing that out, Gamers Going Blind. Queen's Conquest is another game it's on Steam. Literally $20 for 2 characters. I looked at that game. It looks so interesting. It looks so fun. I still, to this day, go to Steam and I check that game out, and I'm like, a bridge too far. I think $10, $15, or some kind of like monthly, relatively low price monthly Patreon subscription that you can dip in and out of, I think that is one of the best ways to present your MVP. Andrew saying, with the rise of crowdfunding, people kind of forgot that it is a form of investment and forgot how things were done before. There was a big shift. There's also this all-or-nothing nature, as Hypergraph points out, that Kickstarter doesn't seem to work well for fighting games in particular, and I think that there are some issues with how that works. There was a big shift in funding, especially single-A, double-A games, and the world of Kickstarter kind of really changed, and the world of crowdfunding really changed as player perceptions about that investment changed, along with some notable failures and some lack of support from, hey, guess what, developers working on early access in development games. There were some issues there, and now there's another shift back away from, right, like, it's no longer one dude. Like, the indie game, the movie era of game development, of indie development, is over, right? We are not Super Meat Boy, we are not Fez. Like, this is not where we're at anymore, and we see a lot of the indie stuff moving actually up into the AA tier, with stuff like, you know, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Ninja Theory is considered basically indie. The Hades developer, right? Like, are they the same as Matrified? No, those are different tiers, right? But they're all indie. So there have been some growing pains with that, and I think it's reflected in how people can choose to invest in some of these MVPs and some of these early access titles. Ponton, you had been asked if you would be doing a Kickstarter for it, and you declined to do it because for you the Kickstarter would come out of maybe at the end of production, where you can say, need $15,000 to implement GGPO networking license. We get the money, we're good. If we don't, then we could still release. Thank you. This is, I believe, one of the ways that you can get people on board. People aren't willing to support a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding campaign for a full project that is sometimes extremely overpriced, but more often than not extremely underpriced. And you can recognize that as a backer and say, that's never going to get done. Looking at someone saying, yo, we need X amount, reasonable amount for GGPO licensing, for networking implementation, for voiceover work, like Matrify did with the Kickstarter for the voiceover work in Murfight, right? That is an excellent way to kind of make it reduce the risk and reduce some of the like hesitation that players have around supporting projects in that way. That is an important shift in how you can choose to go about early development and early access, right? So yeah, recognizing that you get yourself to a point, right, possibly with an MVP, and then you do a crowdfunding campaign showing off your MVP that has been worked on over the course of a period of time, and then you're able to get that final implementation to get into your early access launch candidate phase, right? I think that is very astute, and that's something that's a shift that needs to happen. And I think it's starting to happen, especially as we've seen several pretty notable fighting game Kickstarters and crowdfunding campaigns fail. Like, I'm surprised that Pocket Bravery's Indiegogo campaign didn't go through. I'm surprised that Umblecore's Kickstarter didn't go through. These things are like genuinely shocking to me in some ways, where it's like, based on the support that I had perceived, the fact that they didn't succeed was kind of like, damn, okay, something's off here. So how do you address that? That's definitely one of the ways. Some of the publishers are using Kickstarter as an interest gauge. So yeah, these games only take $100,000 to make. No, it's $1 million, guys. That's not how this works. And then definitely, Andrea, like you say, they got used to that. And that's not the reality of how it works, right? And so we're going through a bit of a reset in how players and now developers are approaching these things. I know, Joe, I can't believe that Emrakul didn't make it. That one was truly surprising. I think that was the one that, for me, said all the talk in the world is not going to change the reality of how people support these games. Why are we supporting them this way? Honestly, it was one of the big things that kind of led me to ask these questions. I mean, I would love to hear from some of the developers in chat. What are the core elements? Like, if you had to pick one or two core elements of an MVP, what would they be? And as we said, like, an MVP should be something that you're willing to put a price tag on, something that a consumer could buy and get the core functionality that is promised. I like to say it needs to be, it better be, for fighting games, it better be as good as a 2D fighter maker game. That's my benchmark, man. If you sell me an MVP and I can get a better experience out of a 2D fighter maker game from 1998, the MVP is probably not ready. 2D Fighter Maker gives you button config, it gives you training mode, a versus, gives you story modes, some can give you challenge modes. These are all components that, like, you have to at least hit that level in order for you to be able to, in order for me as a player and consumer to say that is worth a dollar figure to invest in, right? Now, the issue is that, at least in the fighting game scenario, Andrea says, more players wouldn't play a game with less than 6 characters, or have quite some aversion to that unless they are niche enthusiasts. So, like, that would be a consideration. What is the size of your vertical slice? How wide is your vertical slice is a better question. The Murfight demo, you can do, I believe, offline versus, online versus, training mode, and that's about it. And for 4 characters, which will rotate on a monthly basis. So, like, that's kind of where Matt has put it, right? 4 characters, and then that sounds like a 2D fighter maker game to me, right? We got versus, it's better. Versus online? Shit, man. That's better than a 2D fighter maker game. Looking at those benchmarks as, like, what is it going to require, I think it's an important question for players. And, Andrea, you are right. 2D fighter maker doesn't, they have challenges. Yeah, they don't have challenges and move lists out of the box, by the way. Yes, this is totally fair. But once again, I mean, the number of 2D FM games that you look at that do have those things implemented, I think that's a reasonable ask. I think what I'm saying is that I should probably, if I can pick up a 2D fighter maker game, even if it's the best of the best 2D fighter maker games and kind of a fringe example in that regard, and put it up against your modern day MVP and say, this is a better value proposition, I think that, like I said, that's kind of my comparative benchmark. Because in fairness, you know what, man, as far as me as not a programmer, it's all black magic. So whether you're making a game in Godot or 2D fighter maker, like, I understand that there are differences, don't get me wrong, but, like, it's equally black magic in terms of my capability to do it. So just looking at the experience of what is being offered, the product being offered, that's kind of where I'm at. For Andrea, you're saying the MVP needs to have local versus, an arcade mode, even short but with some AI, or a versus CPU mode, training mode, controller remapping, and audio and video options. Boom. I think that is 100% like a reasonable thing. A training mode, a versus AI / arcade mode, and you're right, I will take either one. I just want to be able to play in a match solo, right? Not have to control 2 controllers at the same time. That's kind of one of the core things for me. Yeah, and I think I'm very much in line with you as like that's my personal MVP, right? And I once again I'd say a lot of 2D Fighter Maker games live up to that. The best of the 2D Fighter Maker games definitely live up to that benchmark. Ponton saying like when I was trying out Terradrome and went online but found no one to my matchmaking. Yep, right? That's a big hit. That's a big hit to take if that's your core thing. So you do have to be careful, right? And I'm sorry, developers. I'm sorry. I don't want to give you guys more work. I really don't want to give you guys more work. You already have so many things to do, right? But it's incumbent on you to manage that online presence and community and the health of your online matchmaking. Whether that be you're the best shill in the world and right, or like the best marketer in the world and you can just convince people to play your game, whether it's you have the most inherently compelling offering, or whether or not you are actively engaging in creating community nights and making sure people get out onto your lobbies and doing free Steam weekends and running a tournament for it that is free to enter and maybe has some kind of reward at the end of it, right? If you have a demo that people can use to play online, like we have now with Murfight, right? Do a weekend where you're like, hey man, Friday is community night and everyone gets into the ranked queue. Saturday is lobby night and we have a King of the Hill lobby. And then Sunday is the tournament and it's free to enter. And even if you don't own the game, you can win a copy, right? You can win copies and you can get whatever. But like, it's going to be incumbent on you to invest in that presence. Because like you said, it becomes very, very important when a player clicks online, they need to be there, right? And so even if it's like, hey man, if I know if I click online on Friday, I'm gonna find someone, that's an amazing start and better than most games, right? Especially at this tier. Online not part of an MVP? Very good question, Hypergraph. For me, no. I am resourceful enough and used to not having online enabled games that it's not gonna hurt me. I would say it would become essential in lieu of having any AI. If you have no AI, but at least have a way that I can connect to other players online to fight them, I would actually accept that. I would take like training mode, basic online matchmaking, just like one and done casuals, or training mode and some level of single player AI content. It's really tough, but once again, that is going to depend on what your priorities are, right? Some people, honestly, you don't have to make a fighting game that is meant to be played online. Like, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, man. Like, you don't. I am always thinking about games like Robo-O that has 0 online functionality, and I'm like, that's actually fine. Look at what the game is, look at what it does, look at how much it costs, look at the developer support. Look at when it was built and how it was built. That it doesn't have online? Okay. That Schwarzerblitz doesn't have online? Okay. Would it be amazing if it did? Of course. Of course. I would love that. Are you kidding me? That would be godlike. But it doesn't have to. A game is allowed to be the game that it is, and it can have online or it cannot. It can be a wholly single-player experience or not. One thing I've been saying about what I want out of indie fighting games in 2024 is for developers to be unabashedly you. And if you as a player are kind of like, I don't even need to go online to play people in fighting games, that's not why I like it, that's not why I enjoy it, make the game that you want to fucking play, and you will find an audience for it. And for someone like me, if I love it that much and I want to play with other people online, dude, I will parsec the shit out of it. I will Steam remote play the shit out of it. That's allowed, right? And I think we should all be able to say that's allowed. Because yes, Andrea, thank you. Rollback won't save you. Right? Rollback won't save you. How many indie fighting games, phenomenal indie fighting games, have come out with rollback over the last 5 years and have been able to compete with the major fighting game players who have been able to garner the same mindshare. Kinda them's Fighting Herds, right? Like, kinda Punch Planet, Skullgirls? Like, I think that's the one that we can all be like, sure, Skullgirls. But it won't save you. It's not, it is never gonna be the thing that is like, yeah, that's gonna get you the audience, right? You being the unabashedly you, as I put it, is the thing that is gonna get you your audience. In the world of fighting games and indie fighting games particularly, the idea of the why me proposition, why Murfight over Third Strike, why Explode Judo over VF3 on Fightcade, right? Like, it's a tough proposition. You don't have to fight them on that, right? And I think it's possible to find sustainability elsewhere. Oh god, Andrew, that's so freaking funny. Is Punch Planet still in early access? What was I saying about the perpetual early access stuff? I don't know, man. I don't know. Should that be where it is? Is early access a meaningful thing? Yeah, Ponton confirming, still marked as early access on Steam. If you enter early access without a plan to come out of early access, you are very likely to frustrate your player. And exactly, Grav, Punch Planet seems done to me. I don't get why they're in early access. So that's it. When I look at you and you say early access, I'm like, okay, so what am I being promised? I get worried about buying a game when the proposition is, I don't know, even if it's not conscious, it's one of those subconscious things that turns people off and might lead them away, right? It might be one of the reasons why you have Punch Planet on your wish list for the last 3 years and haven't purchased it. So what are we talking about? So we have our like old style framing of in development games and software that we've talked about. We've talked about a new framing that we can look at it with this MVP into early access as your final push. From a player's perspective, I think it's important to be able to recognize what developers are doing when they put something out, and when they see something that is obviously not complete but is working kind of as intended. That's your MVP, but that comes with certain caveats. This might only be a polished vertical slice, and if that is the case, there are some things that are very out of like, some things might be out of step with other portions of development. You might be able to push for some changes or some things in those aspects, but others might be too far along. Like, if someone is making a beautifully hand-drawn pixel art fighting game, and they show you 6 characters that have, hundreds and hundreds of frames of detailed animation, and they are all complete, don't be like, they should be wearing shorts, right? Like, that is not the kind of change. Like, recognize where they're at with that vertical slice, and that has been pushed to this point, and the combat has been pushed to this point, and the UX has been pushed to this point, right? But that story mode, hey, we can talk about story mode and how that's going to be structured. Challenges, we can talk about how many challenges we're going to have and what style of challenges we're going to have, right? And yes, I understand, Super HC, that they would look very, very cute in shorts, and I agree with you. And maybe down the line for an alternate costume, we can talk about that, right? But like, yeah, recognize that, right? It's like, I'm sorry, if a game, and this is something that unfortunately I think Arcus Chroma has come up against a little bit, where Arcus Chroma is a fighting game that began development so long ago, and it was before the real big push for rollback netcode. And so it was built in a non-deterministic fashion, right? So that means that you'd have to redo how the game is built in order to accommodate for rollback netcode. So it's hard to do. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. But you need to recognize that this game started development at a certain point in time, and that the asking for the change to just say make it rollback, flip the GGPO switch, that's not how that works. And that ask is very different. So even though there is an MVP of Arcus Chroma, you can't say change all the things. As players, we need to be cognizant of that. We need to recognize that and make sure that we're not having unreasonable expectations based on the state of affairs. Victims of the non-deterministic virus, Schwab Engine, Duels of Fortune, Arcus Chroma, Heatwave, all 2D Fighter Maker games. It's true, it's so unfortunate. There isn't a good netcode button. Ponton, Unity games are hard to get the deterministic fixed point system implemented for because the Unity source code, unlike Unreal, isn't available to the developer, right? These are some issues you're going to be running into, right? So, and I think there's been a better understanding from players over the last several years about the idea of engines, in part because of the explosion in rollback netcode and the understanding of how rollback netcode works. It's increased dramatically amongst players. We have a bit of a better understanding, and there's a bit of a better understanding that like people are building stuff in Godot and people are building stuff in Unity, and that Icum and Go is an engine that is different from Mugen and all that kind of good stuff. We're starting to bridge that gap at the very least. And Grav, yeah, you should be deciding if you're going to be doing rollback from day one. That needs to be important. It needs to be communicated. But you as a player might only be finding out about a game that started development in 2017, 2016, before this explosion, before the real cultural shift around rollback happened. Retconning that at this point is tough. Because you're right, it's definitely not a we'll get to it later feature. And Andrea's saying that, yeah, once you accepted that you weren't adding netcode anytime soon, you went ham with the single player experience. Be unabashedly you. Beatdown Dungeon, very good example of something doing the similar thing. Yep. I love that, Ponton. The side note. Yeah, 2017. So for reference, 2017 was when Punch Planet released into early access. Now, the 2018 was the Murphyte Game Jam project. 2022 was the Kickstarter, I believe. And then into early access. And now at the beginning of 2024, it's come out of early access. That is actually a fairly reasonable timeline for something like this. And Matt really did seem to invest in the more agile indie dev style of building out. He built out the 12 characters and put it out right after the prototype. And that was a minimum viable product. You could buy it on GameJolt, you can buy it on itch, and then eventually you could buy it on Steam. The core group of users, I think, who will spend time playing games on itch.io and GameJolt will be more understanding of the state of a minimum viable product than your average Steam user. So taking the time to do that and then moving to early access for a fairly short cycle is probably a very good way for indie devs to approach this stuff. And I think it is how they've generally been. But you've seen some fumbles with like look at Punch Planet. Look at how Fantasy Strike handled their management style being much more structured and linear, like the waterfall management style, right? That led to some issues with them being able to address their community concerns. This has been an amazing discussion, folks. I really appreciate y'all coming by here and chatting about this stuff. I think talking about the reality of how our games get made, our favorite games, the games that we love to play, how they get made, like, that's kind of important to think about. So, I mean, like, look, man, this is not a comprehensive guide to building and releasing games, but I think it is a gateway into both players being able to think about these things more analytically and in more speak more knowledgeably on them, but also an opportunity for indie devs to communicate with us about what they need to build these games and what we can do to facilitate that without it being a, like, nasty relationship, right? Like, that's the last thing I want. I don't want a poisonous relationship between players and developers. It would be great to have one that is cooperative and can work towards sustainability. And I think understanding and communication is always a core part of that. So that's one thing I'm hoping to do here is, like, kind of build that level of understanding and build out that communication. More discussion, less discourse, right? The discourse, it's poisonous, guys. We don't need the discourse. We need discussion, and I think we'll get there.